Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to talk about mandala art. This is my first non-calligraphy or lettering video since I started my channel 4 months ago. Surprisingly enough, even though I do not do mandala art very often and I do not even claim to be an expert in this field, this is one video which quite a few of you have requested me to do. So before we get into the video, let's talk about how intriguing this particular art form is. Mandala art is known to be one of the most relaxing art forms, and because of the symmetry of shapes used in it, this art form helps you relax and strike a balance in your mind and is often used as an aid for meditation. Meditation, peace of mind, and a little bit of joy is something we've all needed throughout the lockdown and even now as we continue to self-isolate because the situation is still not as great in certain parts of the world. Learning this art form is not only about adding a little art and joy to your life, but also equipping yourself with a tool to relax and center yourself when you're not in the best of places mentally. But apart from this really helpful stuff, the thing that actually got me really interested in mandalas is the fact that in many religions, they are used to establish a sacred place. Now, I'm not a very religious person myself, but if you Google it or if you've watched any series involving supernatural entities, then you would have noticed that the sigils or symbols that are used to mark a space as sacred to either keep angels or demons away from it or trapped in it are usually these geometrical, symmetrical symbols that look like mandalas because they are. So that's the kind of power these mandalas are believed to have in various mythologies. If I start talking about it in detail, I'll take all of the 10 minutes explaining how cool mandalas are and how they have these mythological significance in different religions. But I'll leave it up to you to Google it and we'll get started with our basics. Also, if you don't already know it, I am Neha from Entrepreneur. I share tips and tricks about easy to create art. And now let's actually get started with our basics. Before you start drawing your mandala, the two questions that you need to ask yourself are how many concentric circles do you want to start with and how many equal sections do you want to divide your circle into. Now, this is something that's not really mandatory, but when you're a beginner, having guidelines is really helpful. This is something I say about calligraphy as well, and the same applies to mandalas. Now, the most important question is how can you divide your circle into equal sections? So the answer to the first two questions, that is the number of circles and the number of sections, completely depends on you and the design that you have in mind. But sometimes it may not be possible to completely visualize a design even before you've started. So the best way to move forward in that case is to draw the minimum number of circles based on the rough idea that you have in mind, and then you can keep adding more as you progress. As to the number of sections, I would suggest that you go ahead and draw the maximum number of sections possible, and if you don't require them, you can work over them. Right now, because I do not have a design in mind, I'm gonna go ahead and draw the minimum number of circles I think I'll need, and as I start working on my design, I will add or remove circles based on how my design has progressed. Now the first thing to do is choose a point that you will be treating as the center of your circle and then you start working around it. The second thing to do is identify how big you want your outermost circle to be. So for instance, if you want your outermost circle to be 14 centimeters, then you take your compass and measure half of that on the scale. That means your compass should be open 7 centimeters wide, and when you draw the circle, it will come out to be 14 centimeters. Now we've come to the part where we learn to divide a circle into equal segments. I am sure a lot of you already know how to do this because we learned this in school, but just in case you don't remember, follow along. So the first thing that I'm going to do is draw one diameter of the circle in any direction. Now I want to make sure that the line that I draw cuts my circle exactly in half, which is why I'll measure the distance of the center of the circle from the edge of the paper, and then same distance I'll mark on the perimeter of the circle and join those 2 points. Whenever you want to divide any segment of the circle into half, you take your compass and you open it wide enough so that the space between the two hands of the compass is slightly greater than half of that segment. Now I usually prefer opening my compass wide enough so that any marks that I decide to make remain outside the circle, so that even if there are any residue marks remaining after erasing them off, it doesn't have any impact on my design as such. So what I'm essentially doing here is I'm putting my compass on one end of the line and drawing a mark outside the circle. Then I'll do the same from the other end of the line, and I'll join the center of the circle to wherever these two markings intersect, and that will divide this section of the circle into half. Now since I did the same thing on the other side as well, what I can do is join the intersections of the two markings I've made on each side. I have now divided my circle into 4 equal segments. Now again I'll open my compass to a size that is slightly greater than half of the segment that I'm trying to divide, and I'll create markings outside the circle from both ends of the segment, and I'll repeat this process for each segment that I'm trying to divide. Once I'm done marking the center of each segment, I'll join the centers of opposite segments together to divide them into halves. And I'll keep repeating this process until I have the number of segments that I actually require. We'll start with a few basic shapes that you can add to your mandala, and then we'll take each of these shapes and try to come up with a few variations of it. Once we're done with that, we'll either take the basic shape itself or some variation of it and try and add it to the mandala grid that we created just now. Now we're gonna add this basic petal shape to the first layer of our mandala. Obviously you can change the height or the width of your petal depending upon the space you have available in your grid or the design that you have in your mind. As you can probably tell by now, adding even the most basic shapes in a symmetrical pattern creates a beautiful design. So as a beginner, you don't have to worry about adding more intricate details. Instead, focus on getting the more basic stuff right. So I'll be adding the leaf shape to the second layer of my mandala. But because this leaf shape is slightly bigger and we have a lot of space to add detail, instead of using the basic leaf shape, I'm gonna use one of the variations that we just created. Another thing to notice here is that instead of using one single section for the entire leaf, I'm using two sections. This is because it will help me to create a more symmetrical shape. So this is what our completed mandala looks like. I've even added some pop of color to it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you next week. Till then, stay safe.